So welcome everybody to this afternoon workshop. I'm glad you made it to the top of the building, the hidden corner. That by itself shows motivation, so we're really pleased with that. For the people online, thanks also for joining. I can't see you, so I don't know if anybody is out there. We'll be trying to monitor the computers if you have any questions, so please raise them in the chat if you do.
We have 6 people online.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Adrian. So we will be watching them, and we will also be asking their active participation later on. So people online, get your coffee and stay awake with us. We need you. Okay, so this afternoon's session is focused on developing circular strategies for digital healthcare devices. We have been hearing quite a lot about the need to be more resource efficient, if not even sufficient. And that's what at least one piece of the puzzle that we're trying to help. Healthcare is a sector that may be a bit outside of your normal comfort zone, but I think with this short introduction and certainly with the pieces on design and the business modeling, we hope we can showcase how that is relevant as well. So digital health and a circular economy, in short, DiCE, is an EU-funded project under the Horizon program for 4 years. And the first question we have to ask ourselves is why? Why yet another program on looking at design guidelines for electronic and electrical equipment? Why is this needed? Well, what we have seen is that the use of digital health technologies has been increasing exponentially over the last few years for many different good reasons. We have, with the use of digital health devices, empowered patients to take care of their own health. They can monitor their own pathway by looking at primary statistics on their health, such as footsteps, for example, but also more complicated, looking at heart monitoring rate. We also use this to enable patients to return home more quickly after a surgical procedure, for example, by allowing them to wear a sensor that will monitor their vital signs while they're at home. So they are being discharged from the hospital sooner, and that's a trend we see in general, where there is a movement from healthcare in a hospital setting to more home care. Oh, that's next door that I hear. Okay, I was a bit confused with that. Like, what's going on? So as you can see here, that number of wearable medical sensors and devices has doubled even in the, or forecasted to double in the coming 3 years between 2021 and 2024. So this is increasingly a problem, and it's maybe more invisible because usually these wearable devices are a bit smaller. So it's not something that is usually at the top of mind. Just some statistics, and I think I'm speaking to the right audience on the challenges that we have in terms of collection of devices, electronic devices in general. In Europe, we see that about 54% is reported to be collected. If we look globally, that number drops to a very low 17%. So there's certainly room for a lot of improvement. And that number does include large household appliances, for example, and computers and all the consumables that you have in your house. So when we are talking about these healthcare devices, this will drop significantly. In fact, what we know is that most of these healthcare devices are being incinerated because they are designed for single use and because of the reasons and concerns around safety of the people handling the devices afterwards. So for sure, there's room for improvements even more in the healthcare sector. But why do we want to cover this? Because we know that also these smaller devices contain raw materials that are very valuable to Europe. We know that it's high on the radar under the Circular Economy Action Plan for all sectors to do something. And so healthcare doesn't have to stay behind and start acting now. One of the challenges that we do have that is specifically relevant to design is that when we design something, it takes years for it to come on the market. It needs a lot of regulatory approvals. So whatever we design today will come on the market in 2030 at the earliest, and is there to stay for another 10 or 15 years after that. So design choices, if anything, is even more important than in any other sector, because changes when it's already launched on the market is very, very difficult. It's not impossible, but it's very challenging, and it's not something we want to do necessarily. So we have to get the design part right. We therefore then want to build in those design choices from the beginning so that we design them that we can extend their lifetime as much as we can. And earlier this morning, we had a workshop on making sure that we have the people returning them as well, either from the home care or from the hospital setting. Obviously, these are two very different use cases for which we need to cater in a different way. So we try to look at this holistically. I will not bore you by reading out the slide, but we want to cross across the entire value chain, going from the design all the way to the remanufacturing, reuse technologies needed, and recycling and anything in between. And within the consortium, we have actors across that entire value chain, helping to find every piece of the puzzle and solving it holistically. And obviously, through trade associations, we want to leverage that to our nearest sector, the pharmaceutical sector and the medtech sector, but then we want to go beyond as well. A brief update on some of the products that are in scope. We have 4 in scope, and they are being categorized with the different challenges we see in terms of regulations. So we have devices that are subject to EU MDR, and that's very difficult to change. It needs a lot of approval, notified body assessments, etc., etc. So doing changes there is not the easiest of way, but it is possible. We have some examples of that. And so notably, the smart wearable sensor and the endocutter are 2 of those devices. On the other hand, we also want to cross-cut across the home and hospital use, representing those 2 use cases. So there we made that distinction where an e-paper label, for example, is used in a hospital, but the smart pill box is used at home. So we really wanted to have a representation across this matrix. We are testing and will be further testing in different geographic areas across Europe, hopefully to capture, first of all, any cultural differences, if there are any. And we've learned this morning that there's actually less than we thought. But also trying to build the ecosystem needed holistically again with all the actors in situ in the different regions to make sure that we can close that loop completely. What are the expected results? We hope that DiCE will be a replicable model for our industries at the minimum, but also beyond that. And I've been saying it earlier today as well. If we can pull it off in the pharmaceutical and medtech sector, anybody should be able to, because our regulations are one of the most strictest that are in place. So there's absolutely no excuse for anybody else not to move towards circular transitioning going forward. And obviously this will help in the reuse of the materials that we have and the recovery of valuable components and materials, leading to resource efficiency, the buzzword we have been hearing over the last 2 days, and pollution prevention at the same time. Just a summary on the project details. We have started last year, 1st of October. We are ending year 1. So a lot of the outcomes that you see are really based on initial assessments, benchmarking, interviews, and so on. So now we will be really working on driving forward all the nudging, forward all the designs, making sure we get the technologies in place and testing them widely. All of this underpinned also through life cycle assessment, obviously. We have 20 organizations. Some may join still. That still is a possibility. We will end the project in 2026. And I'd already do a call out for the people in the room. Note it in your calendar. There will be a big stakeholder event in Brussels at the end of September 2026. So that's really early warning here. Put it in your agenda and be there. With that, I would like to give the floor to Jeremy and Tamara, because they will be now guiding us through a very interesting brainstorm session on design. Before I do that, however, there's one more thing that I wanted to raise, and that is that you may have seen at our DiCE booth, we had our Lego version of a medical sensor. And we did promise the people who entered into our competition of disassembly and design to be awarded with a certificate. So for the glory of those people, and I'm not sure whether they are here or not, we do have the certificates available here. We want to call out the names, and I'm looking who has the names of the winners of our competition. We will hold everybody in suspense for a little longer until we have the final names. With that, Jeremy, over to you.
Thank you. I'll although I think this is where, Elke, you wanted to take it first, is that right? Cool. But yeah, this is the more interactive session on overcoming barriers to circular health devices. So we're going to do 2 brainstorms and a brain breaker, which I don't even know what that is, but we'll start with that.
Something you break your brain on. It's a brain breaker.
So, we're going to review top 10 barriers to circularity in digital health devices. And do the brain breaker on balancing economic viability in the circular economy. Then we'll have a brainstorm of about 15 minutes or so on strategies to overcome those top barriers to circularity. And then a second brainstorm, also about 15 minutes, on how to use business models to drive circular design and improvements. And so, yeah, we want to do we're going to do this in groups of probably 4 to 5 people. So if you are in the front row, you guys can spin around to work with the folks behind you, and feel free to like get up and just get in a different chair if you want. And we have Post-it notes for you to write stuff down on, and we have markers. If you don't have a pen, just like raise your hand and we can throw your marker. We can online, and people online. You guys can type ideas into the chat box. Oh, don't need to speak into the microphone. Okay, for those of you online, you can. Wait, I need a different microphone. This. I don't hear anything. Good idea. Okay. So hopefully online people can hear me now. And so, yeah, so you can brainstorm by typing into the chat box. And I think Adrian will moderate that as needed.
Yeah, we get 4 right here. Yeah. 5 there.
I guess this one.
So a brain breaker is something where you need to really think hard about, because it's a very difficult question. And we would need your ideas on what is? Yeah, so the question is here, and Camille will explain it, and then the task is to write on papers the ideas you have.
Thanks. Okay. So yes, this is more of a reflective question, we can say, and something we would like for you to take with you out of this room or after you close your teams. And it's basically, how do you balance economic viability in a circular economy? So in a lot of the interviews that I've conducted, the theme of financial feasibility came up a lot, evidently. And especially when I asked a question about how do you measure whether a circular model is successful or not. And a lot of people would answer, they would look at gross profit between A and B, like product A and B, or they would look into the cost reductions that might be from using product B or system B instead of system A, which is all very good. But what we know about circularity is we need to stop thinking up in our own lane, and we need to think in an ecosystem way. So your company needs to realize what your role is in the ecosystem to truly make this work, which is what we try to illustrate through the picture. And basically what I would like to encourage you is to start thinking about how can our suppliers, both upstream and downstream suppliers, benefit financially by participating in a circular economy, because if only one company wins, the supply chain loses. And yeah, it's a difficult question, one we are working on, but that's what I would like to ask you guys. So how do you balance economic viability in a circular economy, thinking about your company, but also the ecosystem that you are in? Let me know if it's unclear or something.
How much time do they have for this?
5 minutes. It's just so you. It's not the core of this workshop. It's more that you write some ideas down, and the most important thing is that you take this mindset out of the room and you start thinking about you in an ecosystem and not you as a company. Yeah.
Great, start having ideas.
Yeah, that's why it was maybe easier if the others came first, because they were used to. And then ours was more like a closing brain breaker, like take reflection. But yeah, because of our. It's
On a revenue,
Yeah,
it's
conversation.
like some.
Yeah, that's all.
That's the other thing, but it's probably, you have to.
Well, maybe it'll just make our later brainstorm even more productive as a result.
Yeah, but it having incentives for the room by the winner. So then you overall get what.
Right, like kind of profit sharing or anything. Right, and you also, it's interesting this comment that they value easily fixed by maybe electronic company just deciding to do like direct
Day. And their job might be a lot simpler. 10 years down the road, they're still like, oh, it's not like a cash cow or whatever, it's making money.
No, it's yeah, and it's also.
Yeah.
You know, it's gonna have somebody in the moment, you better having somebody. But still, if they need to pay them, it's also affecting their profits.
Right, but I think he said that it was the amount of money that laptop or something. Compared to the cost people, and then it was such a round error that it wouldn't even really make a dent. I mean, he didn't show any numbers to back that up, but
Because it's also a little about space.
You want to check on that? And were you gonna do like an experiment at the end?
Yeah, that's. Yeah. Whatever they, anybody wants to make that on the.
Yeah, definitely.
That's fine. I think we'll take all around.
Well, that's the one thing I try to work on, like you have product. And so traditional ROI calculations don't necessarily work. But so I just saw the argument that efficiency is going to get the most efficient product. Frankly, gained like try and five. But now it's control.
There's some controls in ours.
Okay.
I would suggest meetings from
Yeah, but we will stand.
If everyone could start writing on those posters, because we would very much like to collect them at the end. Oh no, it's online.
And then fly home and eat.
Talk a bit about your project lead on that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, let's yeah, I'm off tomorrow because my maybe need to go to the hospital and I need to have all these kind. And on I'm working on Thursday, but I'm also on 4 other projects, so I need to really catch up.
But I wouldn't mind doing a bit later.
Yeah. I think now it's a bit looking at, I will send some slides out asking people for feedback on the timelines, like what we discussed in the report this morning. You look at your notes. So I will maybe like, maybe you can write your report and maybe like the last week of September we reconnect when the review is ongoing.
Yes.
And then we get really up in October when the report is submitted, like how to move forward and when we do a workshop.
Yeah.
There is a monthly meeting as well. Normally, I need to skip the September monthly meeting. We are here now.
Yeah, I think so. But I wouldn't prefer anything.
No, I can say like, please skip that, but use that time for doing your homework. And then September we skip, and then October.
And then I thought that sometimes no one will read the super long report. So I thought it could actually
For the October.
if those are in October.
Absolutely.
If there's you can feel a bit about some.
No, maybe we just do this. We extend maybe we skip September. We extend October for 1 hour, where you give an update on your report, like a summary,
And then invite me.
yeah.
Because it needs to be also outside of our work day.
Yeah, okay.
Because
We can say we do the first half hour open to more people. I put 1/2 an hour before the normal hour, and then other half an hour is just a normal session.
Oh, weird. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Okay, maybe if anybody wants to comment on the discussion.
Okay, everyone, time's up. Sorry, it's short amount of time, but
So is there any group who wants to share the discussion?
We have 2 comments online. Maybe we can start with those, yeah?
Yeah.
So the first one is apply excessive levies to virgin new materials. If they are taxed based on their environmental impact, the scrap pre-used will become more valuable. Then the second comment we have is map the potential financial value, so estimates at first moving to real terms, of each step in the supply chain. This can enable different business models and configurations to be tested and help ensure there is benefit for each stakeholder at each step of the product life cycle.
Yeah. Do you keep these comments? Or?
Yes, I will. Yeah.
Anybody else? Or if you have post-its that we can take home for us to look into.
Yeah, okay. From our group. So first, sales services, not the product. And like implementing extended producer responsibility. So then manufacturer will responsible for the cost and the responsibility of the waste. Then we need to promote more reuse and refurbishing of the certain products, but then I'm not sure if like how much it will apply to healthcare product. And then also introducing social and environmental values for products that have been reused, repaired, or refurbished or remanufactured. And also like changing economic system, so then we can look at it in a different way. Yeah.
Okay.
very good points. Also difficult to start on, but I really like them.
We touched on the economic system as well a little bit, where it was kind of taking that donut economic theory where at some point you have this finite capacity and you're going to have to say, here's how much credits we have, but you have to decide how do you allocate them. And so you're looking at like making sure people have housing and food and healthcare. And then eventually, hopefully you have some credits left to go for fun things, but it might be that you don't, but it takes that new shift. And then you have to, as a company, it's like, do you have value? Do you earn one of those credits or not? But I think it's also when it comes to a product, it's taking a view of, does it actually reduce the climate footprint? So the example, like I've spoke to pharma, where it's like healthcare as a whole is 4.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions, but the role pharma can play is how do we eliminate or reduce all the acute care and hospitalization that really drives that footprint through preventative medicine. So, I mean, there's opportunities there to be creative and how do we reduce the ecosystem.
Yeah, it ties to product design here. It ties to product design in principle. So when you start designing, you have to think as an ecosystem, not as a market. You know, what do you take from the ecosystem? What do you give back to the system? And yeah, that's basically what this gentleman said.
Yeah, super good points, and interesting that we start by design. Maybe we should talk.
Absolutely. That's why we're in a consortium together.
That's true. So we would very much like to gather all of your post-it notes if that's okay with you. Amazing. Okay. But then I would just pass on the word to Jeremy.
Great. All right, thank you. And oh, where did the clicker go? Okay, got it. Yeah. So so now on to the next part, barriers to circularity in the digital health device economy. So this is
all the possible circular recovery flows. You've probably seen the Ellen MacArthur Foundation butterfly diagram of all the, reduce, reuse, recycle, compost, all that stuff. This is Tamara's version of it specifically for the healthcare industry. And I'm seeing actually that this screen is super low res, so all of the text is completely garbage. But it doesn't matter because I wasn't expecting you to be able to read it anyway. I know there's a lot going on in that diagram, but this is just a teaser to tell you that the report that we're going to come out with by the end of the month is going to have this diagram in a readable format. So yeah, so look forward to that. But basically, it's the butterfly diagram that you're familiar with, but it adds some of these. Yeah, again, I can't even read it. It adds some steps that only happen in healthcare, like having to sterilize things and do extra levels of quality checking to qualify products for reuse and things like that. And that the simpler version is this. So there's, this is the normal R's, and excuse me, but there are still a couple more R's that you probably haven't seen before. I'm sure you're used to reduce, reuse, recycle, etc. And some of you familiar with repurpose and remanufacture. There are a couple interesting ones here. One that's very specific to medical devices is some things that get surgically implanted in your body then dissolve as your own body tissue takes over. Now, obviously, that's a very rare strategy. Most healthcare devices are not going to do that. And I hope to never need an operation that does that on me. But it's a possible pathway. And then there's the more standard organic biocycle routes for if you look at it the cradle way, there's technical nutrients and biological nutrients. And so these are the biological nutrient flows. You can compost or just biodegrade in the environment. And then this one, recovering energy, we have an X here because we don't actually consider it a circular flow, even though technically some people do. But yeah, and then other ones that you might not be familiar with, up at the top, refuse. This is one of the most sustainable things you can do, is just don't buy the thing in the first place. Don't produce it in the first place. Figure out other ways to solve your problems, being healthy, being happy, etc., without more stuff. And then rethink is, how can you consolidate functions? How can you get a lot more intensive use out of the same things? So, for example, a lot of product service systems do this, where maybe I don't own a car myself. Maybe I just subscribe to a service that lets me, borrow a car for an hour here and there, so that many fewer cars get produced, etc. And then reduce, that is about usage efficiency, so using less material in stuff, using less energy, etc. So yeah, any questions on the various R strategies that we're gonna look at? No, yeah, pretty standard. Okay, cool. Great. So then barriers to circularity, particularly for digital health. Now, almost everyone in the room is from DiCE, so you've already heard me say this once before, but I'll just go through it quickly for those of you who are new. So Tamara and her assistant did a bunch of research, talking with a bunch of experts and doing a literature review of hundreds of papers to identify what are the most common barriers to circularity in digital health. And a lot of them are the same things that are barriers to any electronic industry, whether, computers, laptops, any kind of electronic device, and even ordinary products that are not smart, even like furniture and clothing and stuff like that. A lot of these barriers are the same, like just cultural difficulty moving away from the linear economy, unclear responsibility or lack of responsibility, focusing on quality and function rather than circularity, inability to collect and separate devices at the end of life, but reverse logistics, basically. Just not knowing about the circular economy and how complex it can be, like in that previous diagram. And logistics and financial constraints. So those are applicable to kind of every company and every product, but things that are specific to digital healthcare, or healthcare, not just digital, but healthcare, is number one, the safety risks, and then number two, the regulations that just require you to treat materials in different ways. And then also unsuitable materials or other product characteristics that get in the way of reuse, particularly for if you want to sterilize something, you know, if you're going to sterilize it by baking it, it can't be made out of this plastic that's going to melt when you cook it, or you can't use some material that'll dissolve when you bleach it to sterilize it, or maybe the materials are okay, but it has some funky, weird geometry like this that will really trap bacteria or things like that. So that's something unique to healthcare. And then the safety risks and regulations, they make everything else worse because they make it more expensive. So the financial constraints are bigger, they make it more logistically complicated, make it harder to collect, et cetera, et cetera. So, so the question that we're going to ask you in a brainstorm here is, how might we overcome these barriers? And I'd like you to particularly focus on the first two barriers. If you want, you can go to any of these barriers, but because the top two are both the biggest barriers and because they make so many other things worse, I think it would be nice to focus on those two. So how can we reduce the perceived safety and regulatory risk without causing actual risk? Because one thing that I should have mentioned before showing this question, but mentioned yesterday, is that a lot of the materials that are thrown away and treated as hazardous are not actually hazardous. Like in hospitals, studies have shown that 85% of the material that is thrown away is actually non-hazardous. It's the same as household waste, and so you don't have to treat it as a biohazard. And yet a lot of stuff does get treated as hazardous waste just in case. And some of that is due to regulations being not specific enough. Some of it is due to people interpreting the regulations more broadly than they need to be interpreted. And some of it is just because people are like, I don't know, I'm just going to play it safe. So the perceived safety and regulatory risk is much higher than the actual regulatory risk and safety risk. So we'll have a brainstorm on that. And for those of you that I know that people think of brainstorming as a generic term for any time we're going to sit around and talk about ideas. So we're not looking for the best ideas. You know, we're not looking for discussions and argument about, oh, that's a bad idea. Oh, these are the problems with that idea. What we're looking for instead is volume of ideas. We're looking for tons of ideas. So their general rules of brainstorming are defer judgment. So if someone else has an idea that you think is stupid, just calm down. Don't say that's a stupid idea. You know, don't point out all the 20 problems with that idea. Have an idea of your own that is a new idea that might solve the criticisms that you have in your head. And that also helps build on others' ideas, which is a good tool of brainstorming. And encourage wild ideas. Again, we don't need to have the best ideas. We want to have a lot of ideas. So yeah, and focus on the topic. So, you know, try to keep focused on How might we overcome perceived safety and health and regulatory risk for circular health devices, as opposed to, having ideas for making furniture more circular or things like that. So try to stay focused, but definitely go for quantity. So this is going to be a 15-minute brainstorm, and I would love 30 ideas from each group. Yeah. 2 ideas a minute, you can do it. And one way to do that is by being really specific. So, you might have an idea, let's have a podium. Okay, that's one idea, but get specific. Is the podium made out of metal? Is it made out of plastic? Is it made out of bamboo? Is it made, where was it made? How is it made? How did it get here? How big is the podium? How small is the podium? You can have 20 ideas just on a podium. So, so getting specific with your ideas is a really good way to have more ideas, and honestly, to have better ideas as well. Even though, again, we're not trying to judge ideas here. We're just going for a large quantity of ideas. And then after we're done with the brainstorm, you can look through and say, okay, here's a good idea that we want to share out to the rest of the group. But yeah, if you just have one good idea out of 30 ideas, you're doing great. Okay, any questions before we get started? Okay, does everyone have enough Post-its and things? We have more. Oh, yeah. There's no dumb question.
This might be a dumb question. I prefer working alone, considering my brain condition. Is that okay?
Yeah, you can work by yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah, just write everything down. Yeah.
Thanks.
Cool. Oh yeah, and let's have one idea per Post-it note, just so that because we're going to collect them at the end as well. And if you have 5 things written on one Post-it note, we won't be able to tell if that's like 5 different ideas or the same idea, just really elaborate or whatever. So yeah, please, one idea per Post-it. Any other questions? Yeah, we do have more Post-its. Okay. Any other questions? Great, let's get started.
Okay, so I hope that you folks had a bunch of ideas. Did any group get to 30 ideas? Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I know most of you are not designers. Oh, yeah. Oh, did you combine it? Awesome. I like it. And so, okay, so now that we are, or, oh wait,
I need to be on the microphone for the people online. Did the online people have a bunch of ideas too?
And there's just two of us, and look what we got.
No,
Nice. with 6 extra virtual brains.
Exactly.
Yeah, nice.
So-
Okay, so now that we're finished with the brainstorm where we're coming up with a lot of ideas, now is the time where we can look through these and decide what might be a good idea. And so let's just have like one idea from each group that you happen to like. Anyone want to volunteer one?
Yeah, we can kick it off.
Oh, great. Yeah, go ahead.
Break the ice. So one of the topics that came up was do something similar like in food supply chains and look at the HACCP. So which is the hazard of the critical points in the supply chain that you need to monitor to have food safety, but you could extend that to medical supply chains. So do that HACCP analysis of your clinical supply chain or your medical supply chain.
I've never heard of that before. So I like that idea. Nice. Other ideas? How about from the big group back there? Let's have 2 ideas since you're such a big group. Yeah, you don't have to choose the best idea, just or any of you that remembers one of yeah. They had that over here too, and I think that's a perfectly legitimate one because again, we're going for the perceived safety and risk. As long as there's no actual risk, yeah, why not, right? Cool. So you're educating them on what is safe and is not safe. Got it. Cool. Great. Yeah, and again, we could have 5 or 10 different variations of that, educating people on what the regulations are, on different levels of safety, on yeah, by product category or by hazard level or whatever. So yeah. Cool. How about from you folks here? Were you all in the same group or 2 different groups? Okay. What are a couple ideas? Yeah.
Okay, well, here's this one. Yeah. Well, you know, it's obvious my job. Make games. And well, I have a very clear example which we're working on, but I can't mention that because there's an NDA. And it's just a competition, so guys. And but also, you know, there's a perceived safety and regulatory risk, and it's in our mindset. It's also something to do with behavior. So for what you first need to do, if you want to change that, you need to identify what the reasons, the backgrounds are for that behavior, and then you need to start a process in the design process or whatever in iterations to change that behavior.
Nice.
So
Okay,
so story, and you can make all kind of games like to prove that it's not hazardous or to experience it. You can visualize that. It's also very important if you have a perceived risk or safety, you can visualize that. And there's also examples for that. You know, there is a risk, a needle stick risk, and there is a VR application where you can use that. It's also for spider and flight risk. So you can use all kind of gamification tools to work on that.
cool. So yeah, so it could be some forms of the education ideas that you had, but yeah, but I like the idea, the way your what your idea was not about what the specific solution will be, but the process to get to good solutions. Cool. Yeah.
So I also had a wild idea. So since we heard about this endo cutter and we also heard about these bins that might be introduced to recycle them, I was thinking of some sort of tissue that is around the endo cutter or some other digital health device in order to help color the endo cutter when there is infected material on it, since otherwise it might be hard, since the other Daniel talked about machine learning algorithms that try to detect these things, and might be easier for those algorithms to detect it once it's colored. So Yeah.
I think that's great. And that actually also kind of connects to some food packaging stuff. I know that some people have invented food packaging where instead of just the expiration date being a fixed date, which is just a guess, they'll actually have chemical sensors in them, or just a material that changes color when, you know, if it's meat, when the meat goes bad, the label changes color. And so, yeah, maybe the same technology could be used on the endo cutter to color code it when it's infected.
Right, but I'm not a designer, so that was a wild exercise.
No, I think that's great. Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing here, and I think that was a good idea. Yeah.
We have a few online, so maybe I'll just
Yeah.
First one is create a regulatory authority for remanufactured device, which embeds its mark on devices to say that they are as new, remanufactured, and that it can be tracked and validated. Second one is penalize incorrect disposal. So devices should be returned at a specific source, and if not returned properly, the person should or the user should pay. And then we have another idea, which is policies for health devices and practices need to include the concept of circularity to encourage the perception that circular health devices are safe. This will also encourage for a more formal and legal safety framework on disposal and remanufacturing of healthcare devices, which results in actual safety of the circular device.
Cool. Yeah, and I think those work together and connect to some other things that people said. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, an interesting idea from the gentlemen that were with us that unfortunately had to leave. They were from the Egyptian Ministry of Health and came up with the idea to make a periodic review of the regulation governing the devices, so that we don't try to match new technologies with the regulation, but actually can update it for new ideas that might not have existed at time of writing.
I love that idea. Yeah, because that's a way of making the regulations more specific, so they can catch the things that do need to be controlled and that don't need to be controlled. So yeah, I like that. Any other ideas that people thought were fun? Did we get your group?
Show evidences that circular products are as safe as original, if they are at all.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, very similar to what the online people said. So yeah, cool.
And make all tests as for original products.
Sorry, what was that?
All tests on the circular products as for original products.
Right, so that it passes all of the same quality control tests. And yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great. So, okay, any last things that anyone wants to mention for your ideas from this one before we go into the next one? No? Cool. All right, so please pass all your Post-it notes this way to Tamara. She will collect them all. Yes, because we're going to do a second brainstorm, and we don't want to confuse the ideas for this one with the ideas for the next one. And yeah, I can. Beautiful, very neat and tidy. It's okay. We have a great idea. No, we have plenty more Post-its. We have a whole stack. You can have 100 terrible ideas. It's good. We've got you covered. Exactly. So, right, clicker. Okay. So great. So that was brainstorm number 1. And then brainstorm number 2 is going back to all of these R strategies of how we can refuse, reduce, reuse, remanufacture, recycle, etc. How might we use business models to support circular health device and system design? So how do we support these design strategies for digital health devices with new business models? And for yeah, for those of you that are not part of DICE and don't talk about business models normally, this is things like where are you going to get the revenue? You know, who is paying you? Is it the customer? Is it the doctor? Is it the hospital? Is it the insurance company? Someone else? How do you get in contact with those people? You know, how do you establish market channels and communications, establish customer relationships? How do you set up your supply chain? Who are your key suppliers? What are your key activities? What costs do you have? How could you reduce your costs and or increase your revenues? So anything related to the money side of things. So how can you come up with different business models? Maybe they're product service systems, or yeah, maybe different people are paying, maybe there are tax incentives, maybe the government is giving you money because it'll be saving in healthcare costs or something. So again, it's a brainstorm. So there are no bad ideas. We'll defer judgment and we'll encourage wild ideas. Have some intentionally crazy, weird, stupid ideas. It's okay, especially because then someone else might get inspired by that to then build on that idea and have something that is actually very practical and actionable. Because instead of them saying in your head, that's a stupid idea, they're going to say, how could I make a version of that idea that I don't think is stupid? Or that is still stupid, but is at least different. Going for quantity here, not quality. So yeah, and but still focus on the topic. And again, getting specific is very good. So you know, if you want to say have an idea for increase revenue, great. Let's have 10 ideas on who are you going to get that revenue from? How are you going to get it to be high revenue? How is that going to be fair to other people, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yeah, any questions before we start? No, great. So let's go, and and just raise your hand if you need more Post-its, and I or Tamara will come around and bring them to you. And we've got, yeah, 15 minutes for this as well.
No, I just keep thinking of the business.
Okay, so I know that we could go much longer on these things, but because we're supposed to wrap up at 3:30,
let's do that now. So I hope that you had a bunch of good ideas and a bunch of terrible ideas and a lot of mediocre ideas in between. So who wants to share any idea, good, bad, or otherwise? Yeah.
Leasing products rather than selling the items. So you buy the service, not the product.
Excellent. Yeah, and I was talking with these folks over there, and that could do two things at once. It might increase the circularity, and it might also increase access to medical care or medical devices to people who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford it. Because if you have a 200 euro product that you use for a year, 10 euros a month, whatever, 18 euros per month is much more affordable than a 200 euro one-time payment. So that could have social benefits as well as environmental benefits. Yeah. Yes.
I said promote shared ownership. For example, there are these devices like portable ultrasound devices. And yeah, it's starting up where departments or hospitals. So actually these portable ultrasound devices were being used by GPs. So there's this whole initiative of general practitioners being able to use ultrasound for first level triage scanning. And actually, one of the business models proposed here was that they make use of shared ownership of these devices, and also it reduces overall cost, and also has an extended responsibility, so a shared sense of responsibility as well.
I think that's great. Actually, in Tamara's scoring of greenest, best practices, greenest healthcare devices out there, a product doing exactly that, the Shenzhen TE Air portable ultrasound machine was, I think, number 3 or number 4 greenest product, most circular product. Yeah. So yeah, good idea. Yes.
So yeah, linked to the idea of attractiveness for investors, we said well, cost avoidance and yeah, reduction of cost, as well as avoiding investment in old tech, for instance.
Cool. All right. Yeah. Gotta, yeah. Thinking about who's going to pay not only in the immediate sense of once the business model is up and running, but also how do you get the business started in the first place? How do you get people to invest in it? That's a good perspective as well. I wasn't even thinking of that when I put this up. So cool. How about something from over here?
I can maybe point out a stupid idea.
Great.
That we have like one company that collects all waste types, like everything, in one bin and then sort it out itself and then sells it again as a input for other companies or materials for other companies. But yeah, that's of course a very specific idea.
I mean,
that's a business model.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's a stupid idea. I think it just might be difficult to figure out how to make the sorting cost effective. But I think there are a lot of ways where you could do sort of a partial version of that, where maybe it makes a lot of sense to collect all products of a certain vague category, like, I don't know, like all syringes or all sharps, which is a whole bunch of different things. And, maybe the waste handler could be specialized enough, but not so specialized, and then they send them on to different people. So yeah, there might totally be a workable version of that. Yeah. Yes.
There's one online as well, which has use existing business models in other safety critical and highly regulated industries to inform the development of systems or services model for medical devices.
Nice. I like that because, yeah, I mean, healthcare is very regulated, but it's not the only industry that's very regulated, like the airline industry, very regulated, the auto industry, very regulated. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting insight. How about from someone around here? Yeah.
So I have jotted down some. I wanted to present two. One is choosing a modular or upgradable design.
Yeah, excellent. That is always a good strategy for circularity because, yeah, it can go pretty high up here, and you can potentially, if you do it well, you can make a bunch of money by selling the same product over and over with just a little add-on modules.
IKEA-like, but better than IKEA.
But better than IKEA.
And choosing energy and cost-efficient process engineering protocols. So hopefully that should ensure environmental and business sustainability while scaling up.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is actually a really big frustration of mine, where out in the business world, there's a ton of sustainability things that save money, like using less energy also saves money, using less material also saves money. But as soon as it saves money, executives tend to reclassify it from being a sustainability initiative to a cost initiative. And I'm like, hello, that's how we get this negative stereotype that sustainability stuff doesn't make money, because you have ignored all of the huge number of sustainability strategies that do make money. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, maybe I can comment on that from experience, let's say. So this is the first thing that we want to get rid of in the company, let's say, is that sustainability is costing always, because that is still a big perception for some stakeholders. It's costing me money. And so first thing we do is give examples and showcase examples like, you've done this, which you've done for cost optimization. Look, this is the sustainability benefit you have, and so on and so on. And then people start saying, oh, it's not costing me money. I can get some money out of this, but it's a learning process.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just changing that categorization in people's heads that we need to fix. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, and I thought of this. Sorry, I was thinking of operation planning in a hospital and this endo cutter also. And I was thinking of they have so many scores that surgeons need to see before an operation currently. And when making this operation planning, they could also incorporate some sort of environmental impact score, but also cost impact score. What would a certain type of operation also not only from a cost perspective, but also from an environmental perspective, what would that mean? So what would be the impact of this operation, not only from a patient perspective, but also taking into account these other considerations. So actually that could also improve the decision-making and could potentially even involve the patient. So would you be okay to?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
So since we have these schemes also for airlines now, right, that you compensate for your environmental impact. So in that sense, having more transparency about these impacts could also help to support shared decision making between different actors in a healthcare system.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how things are in Europe, but I know in the US, transparency, even just about how much things will cost you, is terrible. The doctors don't even know. And so, yeah, making both that cost and the environmental information available to the doctors and the patients and everyone else. Yeah, I love that. And you had another one?
Yeah, I think Daniel's idea, I would like to raise that also by integrating it into the business model, like exploring new revenue opportunities, like participating in regenerative medicine applications, like, tissue engineering or organ printing, all aligning with both circular design and circular repurpose or reusability, that sort of environmental design thinking, and also healthcare goals.
Okay.
This is a regulatory gray area at the moment.
Got it. Yeah, I know nothing about the environmental impacts of like regenerating tissue or 3D printing organs.
Which is very much part of the bio strategies that you have there.
Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah, interesting. Cool. And I think, are we out of time now? Oh, yeah, we're a little bit over time. So great, that is it. Please pass your Post-its to Tamara again. And thank you very much for playing along. I hope this was interesting for you.
And before we let you go, we do have the certificate announcement of the winners of the Lego Master Build. So if you know the people who are the winner, let us know. So first off, we have Damien Jurko, who's Master of Sustainable Design, because he was the quickest to do the disassembly. Congratulations. And then we have a special category for Peter Jensen, because he not only disassembled, but he came up with such a different design, which he built himself at the stand. So congratulations to Peter on that as well. So he is officially the Lego Master Builder, while Damien is the Master Disassembler. Thank you.